Are you ready to revolutionize your mindset? Wake up to the power of fearless ambition with the Fearless Hustle podcast, where every episode fuels your journey to success. Because success isn't brewed overnight, it's crafted step by step. Stay tuned, stay fearless.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at something I think we've all felt at one point or another, that feeling of like, I'm not ready yet. You know, it can be so frustrating when you have this goal, but you just feel like there's always something in the way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, it's like our brains are basically wired for comfort and safety, right?
Yeah.
So like when we're faced with anything new or challenging, it's natural to hesitate. And we've got some really fascinating research here that like digs into why we make excuses, but even more importantly, how to actually break free from them.
Yeah, I am so ready for that because,
Yeah.
you know, I've used every excuse in the book. Like not enough time, not enough skills, fear of failure. I mean, the list goes on and on. But it is kind of comforting to know that like I'm not alone in this. But it doesn't, doesn't make it any less frustrating.
Yeah, it's funny how we all kind of like gravitate towards those same excuses. But here's the thing. What if instead of looking at these feelings as roadblocks, we saw them as opportunities? Like opportunities to learn and grow and ultimately like achieve those goals.
Okay, I like where you're going with this. So instead of saying I'm not ready, how do we like shift that mindset? What's the magic formula?
Well, there's no magic formula, but there are definitely strategies that can help. And one thing that really resonates with me from this research is this idea of starting small. It's about breaking down those big goals into more bite-sized pieces.
So instead of saying I'm going to write a novel, it's more like I'm going to write a page a day.
Exactly. Or, like if your goal is to start a business, maybe you just focus on like creating a logo or researching your target market. Just remember that even like small actions can build momentum.
I can totally see how that would work.
Yeah.
When I finally finished my first screenplay, it was because I stopped thinking about it as this like massive project.
Yeah.
And just focused on writing like one scene at a time.
There you go. You were starting small without even realizing it. And that feeling of accomplishment that you get after completing each step, that's what really fuels you forward.
It's like those level up moments in video games. You get that little like dopamine hit and it keeps you going.
Exactly. And just like in those games, when you level up, you often face tougher challenges. But you're also better equipped to handle them. So the more you act, the more confident you become. It's a cycle that just feeds itself.
So it's not about waiting to feel confident before you start. It's about building that confidence through action.
Precisely. Another super important element that's highlighted in this research is finding accountability. So this could be like a friend, a mentor, or even an online community, having somebody to share your goals with and who can kind of check in with you can be incredibly motivating.
Yeah, I think this is where I've struggled in the past. I tend to keep my goals to myself, partly out of like a fear of judgment. And partly because I don't want to let anybody down if I don't succeed.
I hear that. But think about it this way. When you share your goals with someone you trust, you're not just making yourself accountable, you're inviting them to be a part of your journey. And most people, especially those who care about you, are going to want to see you succeed.
That's a good point. It's like having a cheerleader in your corner, someone who's invested in your success and can offer support along the way. Okay, so we've got starting small and finding accountability. What's the third piece of the puzzle?
So this one is particularly important for those who tend towards perfectionism. It's the idea that done is better than perfect.
Oh, man, that's me all over. I can get so caught up in trying to make things perfect that I never actually finish anything. Any tips on how to break out of that cycle?
Sure. Well, one thing that's really helped me is reframing the way I think about mistakes.
Right.
So instead of seeing them as failures, I try to view them as learning opportunities. Every time I mess up, it's a chance to figure out, okay, what went wrong and how can I do better next time?
That's a really healthy way to look at it. But how do you deal with that inner voice that's like screaming, this isn't good enough?
Well, sometimes you just got to tell that inner critic to hush. It's about acknowledging those feelings of self-doubt, but not letting them dictate your actions. Remember, progress over perfection.
It sounds like it all comes back to taking action. Starting small, being accountable. And letting go of that need for perfection. Easier said than done, but definitely worth striving for. Speaking of taking action, our research actually highlights someone who embodies all of these principles perfectly. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah. Sarah's story is so inspiring because it shows what can happen when you take action, even when you don't have all the answers or even feel fully ready. I mean, she had zero experience in the fashion industry, no formal business plan, and very limited resources when she started.
And she literally cut the feet off her pantyhose to create the first prototype for Spanx. Talk about scrappy and resourceful.
Right. But what's even more remarkable is that she didn't let her perceived limitations stop her. She believed in her idea, and she found a way to make it happen. I think that's the key takeaway here.
So it's not about waiting for the perfect moment or having everything figured out before you start. It's about taking that first step, even if it's a small one.
Yeah.
And building from there.
Exactly. Confidence comes from action, from showing up and putting in the work. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that Sarah's story isn't just about starting a business. It's about starting anything you want to achieve in life.
That's such a great point. Whether it's writing a book or learning a new skill or even just asking somebody out on a date, the principles are the same. Start small, be accountable, and don't let the pursuit of perfection hold you back.
And remember, you don't have to be fearless to start. Courage often comes after you take that first step.
I love that. It's like that old saying, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Exactly. So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with a question. What's one small step you can take today to move closer to a goal that you've been putting off? It doesn't have to be big or groundbreaking, just something to get the ball rolling.
I am definitely going to be pondering that question myself. And we'll be right back after a quick break.
To dive deeper into the psychology of procrastination and how we can overcome it.
Fearless hustlers, it's time to wake up to a new mindset. Just like the perfect cup of coffee, success is brewed with consistency, passion, and action. Tune in to the Fearless Hustle podcast and fuel your dreams, sip by sip, step by step. Let's get back to the show.
Okay, so we're back and ready to kind of explore those sneaky ways that procrastination can creep into our lives. I know for me, there are days when suddenly cleaning the fridge seems way more appealing than tackling a work project.
Oh, totally. Procrastination is like a master of disguise. It tricks us into thinking that we're being productive when we're actually just avoiding the task at hand.
So is it more than just laziness? Is there a psychological element to it?
Definitely. One of the articles you sent me really dives into the emotional roots of procrastination. It points out that we often put things off because of fear of failure, fear of judgment, even sometimes fear of success.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know I've definitely procrastinated on projects before because I was afraid of not living up to my own expectations, or even worse, the expectations of others.
It's like we're subconsciously trying to protect ourselves from potential pain or disappointment. But the irony is that procrastination often leads to more stress and anxiety in the long run.
Because we're still thinking about that task, even when we're busy doing other things.
Exactly. It's like you're carrying around this mental weight, and the longer we procrastinate, the heavier it gets.
So how do we break free from this procrastination trap? Besides the strategies we've already talked about, of course.
Well, one technique that's often recommended is something called time boxing. It involves setting a specific amount of time to work on a task, even if it's just for 15 or 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. It's kind of like tricking your brain into thinking. Yeah, it's not a big deal.
Exactly. By setting a time limit, you're removing that pressure of having to complete the entire task at once. And oftentimes, once you get started, you'll actually find yourself getting into a flow state.
Yeah.
And wanting to continue working even after the timer goes off.
I can see how that would work. It's like they say the hardest part is getting started. Once you take that first step, the rest often falls into place.
Right. Another thing that can be helpful is breaking down tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks. We touched on this earlier with the idea of starting small, but it's particularly relevant when we're talking about tackling tasks that feel really overwhelming.
So instead of looking at the big picture, you're focusing on just one small step at a time.
Precisely. And each time you complete one of those small steps, you get a sense of accomplishment that motivates you to keep going. It's all about building momentum.
It's interesting how all of these strategies seem to tie back to that core principle of action, whether it's starting small or being accountable, or just setting a timer and diving in. It's all about taking that first step.
Absolutely. And that's really what separates those who achieve their goals from those who don't. It's not about being fearless or having all the answers. It's about having the willingness to act, even when it feels uncomfortable or uncertain.
And I think it's important to remember that Action doesn't always have to be big or dramatic. It can be as simple as like making a phone call or sending an email or even just writing down your goals.
Exactly. What matters is that you're moving forward, even if it's just one small step at a time. You know, this reminds me of another aspect of Sarah Blakely's story that we didn't really touch on earlier.
You mean the part where she faced rejection after rejection before finally finding someone who believed in her idea?
Yes. It's easy to look at successful people and think, oh, everything must have come so easily to them. But in reality, most successful people have faced countless setbacks and obstacles along the way.
It's like that famous Thomas Edison quote, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work."
Exactly. And I think it's so important to remember that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the process. What separates those who ultimately succeed is their willingness to learn from their mistakes and keep going.
This is not about avoiding failure altogether. It's about reframing how we view it, seeing it as like a stepping stone rather than a roadblock.
Precisely. And I think this ties back to the idea of embracing imperfection. We talked earlier about how the pursuit of perfection can be paralyzing. But when we allow ourselves to make mistakes, to try things that might not work out, we open ourselves up to the possibility of growth and learning.
That's a really empowering way to look at it. It takes the pressure off of having to be perfect all the time. Speaking of taking the pressure off, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the importance of celebrating our wins. This is something I'm personally trying to get better at.
Oh, absolutely. Celebrating our wins, both big and small, is so crucial for maintaining motivation and momentum. It's like giving ourselves a pat on the back and acknowledging our progress.
I think it's easy to get so caught up in the hustle and the pursuit of the next goal that we forget to pause and appreciate how far we've come.
Exactly. And when we don't take the time to celebrate those wins, we risk burning ourselves out and losing sight of why we started in the first place.
So how do we get better at celebrating our wins? Do you have any rituals or practices that you find helpful?
Well, one thing I like to do is keep a success journal. Every day I try to write down at least one thing that I accomplished or that I'm proud of. It doesn't have to be anything major. It could be something as simple as finishing a work project or going for a run or even just making a healthy meal.
I love that idea. It's a great way to shift your focus from what you haven't done to what you have accomplished. And it helps you cultivate an attitude of gratitude, which is so important for overall well-being.
Absolutely. Another thing I find helpful is sharing my wins with others, whether it's with a friend or family member, or even on social media. Sharing our successes helps us to acknowledge them and to feel a sense of pride in our accomplishments.
It's like you're inviting other people to celebrate with you, which can make the moment even more special. And it can also inspire other people to take action towards their own goals, which is always a good thing.
Speaking of inspiration, one of the articles you shared talks about the power of visualization. It suggests that spending a few minutes each day, visualizing yourself, achieving your goals, can actually help to make them more likely to come true.
That's really fascinating. So it's not just about positive thinking. It's about actually creating a mental image of yourself succeeding.
Exactly. The article mentions that when we visualize ourselves achieving a goal, we're essentially creating a mental blueprint for our brains to follow. And when we combine that visualization with action, we create a really powerful force for change.
So it's not about sitting back and waiting for things to happen.
Yeah.
It's about actively visualizing what you want,
Right.
and then taking steps to make it a reality.
Exactly. And you know, this reminds me of a quote by the author and motivational speaker, Dr. Wayne Dyer. He said, "You'll see it when you believe it."
I love that. It's so true. If you don't believe in ourselves and our ability to achieve our goals, then it's unlikely that we'll ever take the necessary steps to make them happen.
And belief is often the result of action. The more we act, the more confident we become, and the more we believe in our ability to succeed.
It's like that cycle we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Action leads to confidence, which leads to belief, which leads to more action. It's a beautiful upward spiral.
And you know, as we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive, it occurs to me that this whole conversation about overcoming procrastination and achieving our goals is really a conversation about personal empowerment.
I like that. It's about recognizing that we have the power to create the lives we want, even if it means starting small and being accountable and embracing imperfection along the way.
Absolutely. And it's about remembering that we don't have to do it alone. There are people who want to support us, resources that can guide us, and an entire community of like-minded individuals who are on this journey with us.
So true. So to our amazing listener, we encourage you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep taking action towards your dreams.
And don't forget to celebrate those wins along the way.
We'll be right back to wrap up our deep dive with some final thoughts and actionable takeaways.
Fearless hustlers, it's time to wake up to a new mindset. Just like the perfect cup of coffee, success is brewed with consistency, passion, and action. Tune in to the Fearless Hustle podcast and fuel your dreams. Sip by sip, step by step. Let's get back to the show.
All right, so we've talked about a lot, the psychology of procrastination starting small, but I think what's really sticking with me is this idea that success isn't like a destination. It's more like a journey.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in that I'll be happy one kind of thinking. I'll be happy when I get that promotion, or when I lose those 10 pounds, or when I finally finish that project. But the truth is, happiness, just like success, it's found in the journey itself.
It's like we're always chasing that next milestone, that next achievement. And we never really stop to appreciate where we are right now. And even when we do reach a goal, there's always another one waiting right around the corner.
It really is the classic hedonic treadmill. We work so hard to achieve something, and then the satisfaction just fades so quickly, and we're off chasing the next thing.
So how do we break free from that cycle? How do we find contentment and fulfillment in the present moment, even as we're striving for those bigger things?
I think it starts with gratitude. Taking the time to appreciate what we already have, the progress we've made, the people who support us. It's about finding joy in the small things, the everyday moments,
It's funny you should mention that, because one of the articles we looked at talked about the importance of mindfulness. And it suggested that practicing mindfulness, even for just a few minutes each day, can help us become more aware of our thoughts and feelings in the present moment.
Oh, mindfulness is such a powerful tool. It helps us to quiet that constant chatter in our minds and just be present in the here and now. And, when we're present, we're much more likely to notice the good things, the things that bring us joy.
It's like we're training our brains to focus on the positive instead of the negative.
Exactly. And, this brings us back to something we talked about before, celebrating our wins. When we take the time to acknowledge and celebrate our accomplishments, no matter how small, we're actually reinforcing those positive neural pathways in our brains.
So we're basically training our brains to see the good, to focus on the progress we've made, rather than the things that we haven't done yet.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly empowering. It helps us to build confidence and to believe in ourselves and to keep moving forward even when things get tough.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, what are some key takeaways that you want our listener to walk away with?
Well, first and foremost, remember that you are capable of achieving amazing things. You have the power within you to create the life you want, even if it doesn't happen overnight. Start small, be accountable, and embrace imperfection along the way.
And don't forget to celebrate those wins, both big and small. Those moments of celebration are like fuel for the journey.
And lastly, remember that success isn't a destination, it's a journey. Find joy in the process, practice gratitude, and be present in each moment. The journey itself is where the real magic happens.
That's beautiful. And to our amazing listener, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep taking action towards your dreams.
Stay fearless and keep hustling.